נלמד עכשיו מתוך שיעור תלמוד 10 הספירות עם הרבש. הגענו
We will now read from, we will go into a test lesson with Rabash. We are in test volume 2, part 5, inner light of item 40. And before we go into the lesson, we will first read item 40. Item 40 from the inner light. Words of the Ari. Afterwards, the light returns to being Mati in Keter, and then both Chokhmah and Binah ascend there because of the desire they have. Then you find that there is a great distance between the sons and the light of Baal. For there are two distances between them, Binah and Chokhmah, in which there is no light. Hence, at that time the light of Chesed rises to Binah and is called not Mati in Chesed. In that state, the vessel of Chesed turns its interior and gives the 6 lights below in Gvura. We'll enter the lesson.
So he says next. Ask again. It's called Vak. Okay. Oh, why not? Galgalta is called Vak. Well, every lower one. There should be a rule. Every lower degree relative to a higher degree is called Vak. Meaning the light of Neshama is called Vak relative to the light of Chaya. Light of Chaya is called Vak relative to the light of Yechida. It's not that difficult. Here, it's not like that. Look. Before it was refined, Chokhmah had phase 3 of clothing. After it was refined, after phase 3 of clothing was refined, we are left with phase 2 of clothing, and we have a coupling. A coupling of on 2 phases 2 and 1 degree. He wants to say that there's a difference between Ab, that wants to have a coupling for the sake of Sag, and here we can say that it has the light for the sake of himself. Meaning, before he had phase 3 of clothing and phase 2 of coarseness, 2 lights. Now he has light of phase 2 over 2. Why does he need that? What does that add to him? Before that he had phase 3, I understand. Phase 2 of coarseness, I understand. What do you gain from 2 of clothing that has another degree that was added to it over 2 of coarseness? That's a question. 3 over 2, I understand that the phase 2 gains something from phase 3, but 2 from 2, what does it gain that you add a coupling for itself?
The 3 refines.
No, that's not what we learned. We learned that what is done now is a new coupling that will draw new light over phase 2 of clothing and phase 1 of coarseness. On phase 2 of clothing and phase 2 of coarseness. And we say this light was given to Binah. He says what was born out of the upper one is called Vak. So he asks, that's the same for every degree. Why don't we say that the lower one relative to it is called Vak? You shouldn't call it Vak. But here it's a little difficult. You want to say that they will bestow into themselves. So he tells you into itself. What does it add? I say first it had phase 2 of coarseness. Now it has phase 2. Now it has phase 2 of coarseness. What does he gain from it? What does he get out of it? The coupling. I say the coupling that came from phase 2 over 2 is a new thing. So I can say it's smaller than what they had before compared to phase 3 over 2. By that, it extended it for Bina. Then we'll learn the same. 10 Sefirot in the vessel of Bina. Now we learned in Bina has the light of male called Vak, and it has a Reshima, a record called Nekeva, female, record of clothing, that the vessel of Bina was left in it, and he refers to this record as Gal, and he says that there was a coupling from the Gal called female and the light of male called Vak, and they're both called Vav, Daled. Vav is called Vak, and the record is called Daled, 4. Gal. Together they are Hey. And you have a coupling and you have a new degree. For the sake of who? For the sake of Zerampin. Why? Because the degree is smaller than both of them. It's a result of what they had. Learn about it later. That's why we never use this phase, since the coupling takes place in the upper one. Therefore, the lower one receives only Vak. This explanation we don't use. It's a little difficult. Since it came from Chokhmah, that's why it's called Vak of Chokhmah. That answer is also not enough. Well, let's see next. He asks, why in the Keter you have phase 4 of clothing and phase 3 of coarseness? It does not divide it to say the surrounding light refined before that phase 4 of clothing and then phase 3 of coarseness. Rather, both of them all at once. Whereas in the vessel of Chokhmah, we learned that phase 3 of clothing was refined. What is the difference? So it explains. First of all, what is clothing and what is coarseness? Clothing is called leftovers from the light that was shining. This does not belong to the screen, does not belong to the light that you extend. What is coarseness? Coarseness, he came up in the will to receive. How many phases he can use with the will to receive? More, we say that the last phase is lost. Therefore, in Parzuf of Ab, you cannot make a screen on a great degree called Daled, phase 4. That's why he does not continue to extend the light of Keter of phase 4. In that case, what is the benefit of phase 4 of clothing that remains there, that he has a record from the clothing? And I gave an allegory about it, if you remember. You go to this old Jew, he sits in a senior home, and you ask him, what did you used to do when you were young? And he said, oh, I used to go here and there, I would travel, make a lot of money, and so on. They asked him, do you want the money? He says, of course. Are you ready to go to travel far? He said, oh, no, I don't have the strength to do it. You find that the record from the pleasure, this record from the pleasure, from the light is what's left for him. But from the work, it did not, nothing remained. This is the difference between clothing and coarseness. So he comes and says about phase 4 of clothing that it's included of the record of coarseness. And by both of them, it produces a certain portion of the light that shines in the Rosh, not in the Guf. You can talk about it a lot. What do we do? That he has Yud. It comes to the full degree. You find that all the level phase 4 of clothing that remained there has no coarseness in the degree. That's why there's no coarseness in the clothing, only what the pleasure was. Therefore, before phase 3 of coarseness was refined, you cannot say that phase 4 was refined. There is no coarseness to phase 4 of clothing. Whereas in the vessel of Chokhmah, where you have phase 3 of clothing, then he says phase 3 of coarseness. You have this in general in the Parzuf of Ab. Therefore, he wants to say that in phase 3 of clothing, you have also something of phase 3 of coarseness. Now you need to pay attention. The difference is phase 4 of clothing, there's nothing there from phase 3 of the degree. Whereas here, where in the vessel of Chokhmah, which is phase 3 of clothing and 3 of coarseness that exists in the entire degree. I'll explain what it means. We need to say, when I say Parzuf Ab, the entire Parzuf is called phase 3 of coarseness. Only the vessel of Keter is called phase 4 of 3. The vessel of Chokhmah is phase 3 of 3. The vessel of Bina is phase 2 of 3. Zeranpin is phase 1 of 3. Malchut is coarseness, root coarseness of 3. Everything is 3. That is why there's a difference between 4 that doesn't have any coarseness in the degree and the level of phase 3 of clothing that will shine as the coarseness in the degree. That's why he says that it's enough that the light of this coarseness, this surrounding light, was refined it before it refines phase 2 of coarseness. I think this is the explanation that he gives. So what are you asking? Remember the attitude. From this you understand that the primary division of Abba Ve'ema and Yeshut into 2 Parzufim that we learned, this is mostly the world of Atzilut, we need to know, that is called Gar and Vak, is only to engender the Katnut of the 7 lower Sefirot, the Katnut of Zeranpin. This is because it is impossible for the vessel of Chokhmah to bestow the light of Chesed, which is the phase of Vak, without Gar. If not through the posterior of Chokhmah. Here you interpret Gar as Chokhmah and Vak as Chasadim. So he says the Katnut of Zeranpin, meaning that it has Chasadim without Chokhmah. Then he says because you can't have it at the vessel of Chokhmah. In the vessel of Chokhmah, the light of Chesed will bestow, which is the phase of Vak without Chokhmah, if not through the posterior of Chokhmah, where it shines only Chasadim. Hence, it, vessel of Chokhmah, turns the interior backwards. It says, at that time, Chokhmah turns her interior, her face, after receiving the 9 lights, and shines to Bina face to face. It's only illumination. It says, how did it give? By inverting, by turning her face, turning the face. We should learn 2 discernments. One, turning the face of coarseness, that is the screen. Before it was phase 3 of clothing, now it's phase 2 of clothing. And there's turning of the face of the lights. Before the light of Chokhmah was shining, and now in the face only the light of Chasadim is shining. In Chokhmah, her face is Chokhmah and her posterior is Chasadim. When it turns its face down, meaning to be like Bina, you find that what does it give to Bina? They have 2 phase 2 that come out, only Chasadim. You find that this is the root of Yeshut, which is Vak of Abba Ve'ema. and they can give Zeranpin Chasadim without Chokhmah. I repeat again, the line begins here. From this. From this you understand that the primary division of Abba ve'Ima and Yeshut into two Parzufim, Gar and Vak, is only to engender the Katnut of the 7 lower Sefirot. This is because it is impossible for the vessel of Chokhmah to bestow the light of Chesed, which is the phase of Vak without Gar, lacking Chokhmah, if not through the posterior of Chokhmah. Hence, it turns the anterior backwards. The influence or bestowal of Chokhmah, called face to posterior, what does it Chokhmah bestow now? Chasadim. And this inversion divides the vessel of Chokhmah into 2 Parzufim. Parzuf Gar, where the anterior, the face, remains in its place, and Parzuf Vak of Chokhmah, which turned its anterior, its face, Chokhmah, backwards, giving the light of Vak without Gar. Who did we speak of now? The vessel of Chokhmah. Yesut is also called Vak, after the inversion of the interior of the vessel of Chokhmah. There, the vessel of Vak, for a different reason, because of the lack of Chokhmah. On that, Vak is called the lack of Chokhmah. Again, why is Yeshut of Atzilut called Vak? Lack of Chokhmah. And why is Gar of Binah, Abba ve'Ima, is called wholeness? Because it does not lack Chokhmah. It's a little bit like the same concept, but differently. We learned why is there no Chokhmah, since Bina comes out of the Rosh of Arich. There is no more Chokhmah in the Keter. That's why Bina lacks Chokhmah. But Bina has a correction of Chafetz Chesed, delighted in mercy. It has wholeness, does not need Chokhmah. You find that who feels that there is no Chokhmah? Yeshut. That's why Yeshut is not called Vak. Let's see next. However, in order to engender the Gadlut of Zeranpin, meaning to have Chokhmah, meaning the Gar that belong to those 5 Chasadim, the vessel of Chokhmah must return its anterior upward once more, as in the beginning, to use Chokhmah. Then it is considered that the zone of Binah and zone of Chokhmah, which were divided into Gar and Vak, due to the inversion of the interior of Chokhmah. Now that Chokhmah revoked that inversion of the interior once again, there is no longer a bestowal of Gar and bestowal of Vak in the vessel of Chokhmah. You find that the zone of Binah rise once more to zone of Chokhmah and become one Parzuf once more. Know that this matter is implemented in the Parzufim of Atzilut as well. When Abba ve'Ima want to bestow Mochen of Gar to Zeranpin, Abba ve'Ima and Yeshut become one Parzuf once more. This too is for the above reason that the illumination of Vak was cancelled from the Chokhmah, and the anterior returned to its place as in the beginning. What does it say there? We'll see later. He comes and says that on the one hand we see that anything that came out on the phase 2 of coarseness and phase 2 of clothing is found in the vessel of Chokhmah. It is also found in the vessel of Binah. But there is a difference, like between Gar and Vak. Why?
בא ואומר סברה,
He comes and explains that it's hard to understand. Meaning,
הוא אומר
he says
שחוכמה הופו
that
פניה,
Chokhmah turned its face
שנתנה
once at the time of giving the illumination
כאלה דבינה.
until Pchina Bet phase 2 to the vessel of Binah. I understood that phase 3 of clothing was refined to phase 2. Now,
עכשיו אני שואל, בזמן שהקומה יצאה עוד
now I'm asking, when the degree came out on phase 2, to phase 2 in the vessel of Chokhmah, and that became Chokhmah or not? Meaning, not, meaning during this degree that is in Chokhmah, it's also Vak, according to this explanation.
הוא אומר לנו,
He's not telling us that phase 2 that is in vessel of Chokhmah is called Gal, and what is lower than that is called Vak. This can also be explained by the previous explanation. It's true that there's no Chokhmah here, even wherever it is elicited above, it's called Gal, and then what's engendered from it is called Vak. But according to what he says here, the division is between Chokhmah and no Chokhmah. So I have to say that before it refined to phase 3, that it had Chokhmah.
אחרת,
Otherwise,
מה ההבדל בין זה לזה?
what is the difference between this and that?
הוא לומד הפירת פנים,
He learns about the inversion of the pnimi, of the face, in two ways, both from Gimel, from phase 3 to phase 2, and from Chokhmah to Chasadim. In that case, when does he consider the Chokhmah to be Gal?
כן שנזכר.
Before it was refined.
אם כן, הוא אומר זון חוכמה וזון בינה, ואתה אומר לו אתה
If that is the case, he says Zon of Chokhmah and Zon of Binah are the same level. It's not the same level. Zon of Chokhmah, phase 3 over 2, and Zon of Binah, phase 2 over 2. That's why it's hard to understand which quality is, or which phase is referring to as Vak. Maybe this is the phase that is called Gal. In that case, that Gal, before it was refined, maybe we have to say that it's after it was refined. Same degree that is found in the vessel of Chokhmah is considered Gal, and when it comes out to your suit, it's considered Vak. And that's not understood from here. You understand the point? Again, he says that degree, allegory, I'll say it so you'll understand. We learn in the world of Atzilut that Abba, the Ima of and Yeshut are phase 2 of coarseness. What's the difference? Ga of Binah is called upper Abba Ve'ima. They have wholeness. They have no lack of Chokhmah. Why there's no lack of Chokhmah? Because it's delighted in mercy. Whereas that of Binah, your suit, when they need to provide Chokhmah to Zeralpin, they lack that Chokhmah. They are deficient. They're called Vak. So I know why the phase 2 of coarseness was divided into 2 parts. Since in one part, Chokhmah is deficient, is lacking. Therefore, we learn later, it says that in order to see the Gadlut, when your suit needs to bestow Chokhmah, Gadlut, to Zon, then Abba Ve'ima have to receive Chokhmah. They rise up until the place of Chokhmah and they become one quality. Meaning Abba Ve'ima, which are Bina of Ma, become Chokhmah of Ma. And then you learn, if you remember, Abba is called Chochma of Ma, and Ima is called Chochma of Bon. So Abba ve'Ima, Yeshut, become one partsuf because there's nothing to divide them. So I learned that both of them are the degree of Chochma, both are the degree of Bina.
So here he tells us that the same level that exists in the vessel of Chokhmah is Gar, and the same level that descends to Bina is Vak. And this is the beginning, the root, that in the world of Atzilut will also be so, that the Bina cannot give to Zaranpin Katnut, except when she does not have Chokhmah. And since we learn here that this level of the two of coarseness and two of clothing that went to the degree of Binah was by inverting the face, which is the vessel of Chokhmah, meaning what the Chokhmah became posterior, and now he bestows Chasadim, like Bina, delighted in mercy. It turns out that Bina, that exists in the vessel of Bina, he doesn't have Chokhmah, that's called Vak. However, in the vessel of Chokhmah, where he has Gar, he has Chokhmah. So what is the meaning of vessel of Chokhmah? Before she was refined, we should say. Huh?
Yes, phase two.
So you're saying, what does the inversion of the face give? That he has two houses. What does it mean that she reverses the face? What is that? There's no Chokhmah, there's only Chasadim. That's what we learned, that there is no reversal of the face? No, that's not what we learn.
נעבור לחלק הבא של השיעור, לימוד בין חברים.
We'll go to the next part of the lesson.